You're so obvious.
But she never takes it when she writes because she has 16 plot lines going on at once.
If I chose to take a drug, was it like you called it Ritalin? I think you called it one of the.
So Ritalin would be one of the options.
Whatever drug it was, what exactly would it do under brain scanning to my brain? So if I scanned my brain and took the drug, what would you see in my brain?
Well, I can tell you, it would activate your cerebellum.
Okay, the bit that was a bit sleepy.
It was a bit sleepy, and it would activate your prefrontal cortex, and it would give your brain better energy. So my first SPECT scan, 1991, a woman, she tried to kill herself the night before. I went to the lecture on brain SPECT imaging, and then I walked out of the lecture, and she was my new patient. Her name was Sandy. She tried to kill herself the night before. And as I'm getting to know her, I'm thinking she has ADD. She has an 8-year-old son who has ADD. Talked about the genetic connection. She had an IQ of 144, but never finished college. And I'm like, how'd you study? She said, well, I never really did, except maybe the night before a test, I'd put on a pot of coffee, stay up all night cramming, and then I'd take the test. That's classic ADD way of doing things. And I'm like, I think maybe you have adult ADD. And she goes, oh, adults don't have ADD. And I'm thinking, I'm the doctor. But I'm like, how about if we look at your brain? And I knew from other work I'd done that I should do it twice at rest and concentration. And when she tried to concentrate, her brain completely deactivated, turned off. Like for you, Willing did it once, but if I had done it twice, probably your brain would be busy or at rest. And then when you try to do it, it would drop. And I put the pictures on a couple of days later, I put the picture on the table in front of her. And as I explained it to her, she started to cry. And she said, you mean it's not my fault? And I said, having ADD is sort of like people who need glasses. And I wear glasses to drive and took my glasses out, put them on. And I said, people who wear glasses aren't dumb, crazy, or stupid. Our eyeballs are shaped funny. And we wear glasses to focus. I said, people have ADD aren't dumb, crazy, or stupid. Some of them are the brightest people I know. But their frontal lobes deactivate. Taking the medicine is like glasses for your frontal lobes, help you focus. And she did it. She was conflict driven. She was always poking her husband. They got into a huge fight, which is why she tried to kill herself. She stopped that. She's a better mom. She went back and finished college. I mean, her life's, it's like your brain with glasses.
Wow. My friends that take medication for ADD say that to me. They say it's like their life is before and after that moment. So I completely believe what you're saying. A second ago, you said this phrase when we were talking about the M, which is your mental health and the impact that has on the development of a brain that's either healthy or unhealthy. And you said this thing about you got to make sure you kill the ants, which is killing those negative thoughts. That's much easier said than done. How does someone go about killing their negative thoughts? Is there a process they can go through to do that?
Yeah, it's a habit, right? And it's not hard. But like any habit, you have to do it repeatedly, like over and over and over and over and over and over. Whenever you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals. Whenever you have a bad thought, a sad thought, a mad thought, your brain releases a certain set of chemicals that make you feel bad immediately. Your hands get cold. They start to sweat. Your muscles get tense. You start to breathe erratically. And it all happens instantaneously. Whenever you have a positive thought, a happy thought, a hopeful thought, a loving thought, like I'm back because I loved the first time I was on the podcast with you, a completely different set of chemicals come out and your hands get warmer, drier, your breathing slows down, your heart beats in a healthier, and it happens like immediately. People have ADD, since we're talking about that, they tend to go more toward negative thoughts. because negative thoughts are more stimulating. And here's the exercise. Whenever you feel sad or mad or nervous or out of control, write down what you're thinking. And then ask yourself, is it true? Is it absolutely true? This is a process I learned from my friend Byron Katie. How do I feel when I have this thought? How do I act when I have this thought? And what's the outcome of the thought? So, is it true? Is it absolutely true? How do I feel, act, and the outcome of the thought? How would I feel if I didn't have the thought? How would I act if I didn't have the thought? What's the outcome of not having that thought? And then my favorite part of it is take the original thought. Tana never listens to me. Tana's my wife. I've had that thought. And then turn it to the opposite. Tana does listen to me. And then just ask yourself whether or not that's true. And by directing my thoughts, by managing, so rather than being a victim, so many of my patients are victims of their thoughts until they do the work, right? This is one of the things where do what the F I say. Write down 100 of your worst thoughts. Take them through that process. And by the time you get to 30, they'll stop bothering you.
So if I'm a repetitive negative thinker or a repetitive positive thinker, does that alone change the shape of my brain?
Yes. And in my new book, Change Your Brain Every Day, there's actually pictures of Noelle Nelson. She was writing a book called The Power of Appreciation. And I had her, she wanted me to scan her while she was appreciating her brain. And it looked beautiful. And I'm like, as I'm showing it to her, I'm like, you need to come back tomorrow and I want you to hate yourself. And she goes, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm like, come on, you have to suffer for science. And so we had a positive scan and then we had a negative scan. And the negativity dropped her left temporal lobe, her left frontal lobe, and her cerebellum. It's so interesting. I mean, similar to what your scan looks like, but hers was way worse. I mean, it's a healthy brain and then a deactivated brain. And that explained to me athletic slumps. It's like, why do people get in athletic slumps? Because negativity turns off their cerebellum and they become just a little less coordinated. And I'm not a fan of positive thinking. I'm a fan of accurate thinking with a positive spin. So positive thinking is I can have this third piece of cheesecake and it's not going to negatively impact my body or my brain. Like, no. The don't worry, be happy people die the earliest of accidents and preventable illnesses. So a lot of people come to me for anxiety. And I'm like, so on a scale of 0 to 100, how much is it? And I'm like, 50. I said, okay, our goal is not 0. Our goal's 15. I want you to have enough anxiety, you do the right things.
Somewhat linked to that is a word you used as well, which is stress. When we're talking about the M in bright minds, how to have healthy brains, what role does stress play on our brains?
Stress, especially chronic unremitting stress. So if we think of the stress you had growing up, where there was a lot of fighting, it raises a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol begins to shrink activity in the hippocampus, one of the major memory and learning centers in the brain. So one could at least argue or postulate your struggle in school was because your emotional brain was busy because you were worried about things at home. It makes it more likely you get infections. It makes it more likely that you have learning problems.
And trauma. Trauma was the other word you used, which I thought it was worth diving into. The impact that trauma has on our brains. And does trauma show up when you scan someone's brain? Can you see it?
Yeah, so trauma shows up as that diamond pattern, which is why I asked you about it. It's your emotional brain. Anterior cingulate at the top, it's the brain's gear shifter. Thalamus, often involved in mood. Basal ganglia, amygdala, involved in anxiety. So we often see worry, anxiety, and sadness, and it shows up as that diamond pattern. That after people do EMDR, a specific psychological treatment for trauma, it calms it down. And I say psychological treatment, I'm like, yeah, but it has biological effects. It's a very interesting treatment. So I get you to, like, first thing, write down 10 big traumas in your life. And we'll go after the worst one first and have you bring it up. And there's a whole process to it. But have your eyes go back and forth while you bring it up. And it's so interesting, the connections your brain will make to it. But as you process it, you find you're actually less bothered by it. And it's masterful for single incident traumas like being robbed or being in a car accident. For chronic trauma, it takes longer, but it's so helpful. When I met my wife 18 years ago, her ACE score, adverse childhood experiences, on a scale of 0 to 10, how many bad things happened to you, was an 8. And I was so taken with this woman. And one of my first gifts to her was 10 sessions of EMDR. One, I wanted to see if she would like wrestle with her traumas. She went for 2 years. And I'm absolutely convinced that's one of the reasons she and I rarely fuss with each other, because we don't trigger each other.
And when you talk about trauma, it's not these big T traumas that some people sometimes talk of, which is, when I was young, I was fondled by my uncle, for example. It can also be an isolated incident that happened when you were an adult.
Absolutely. It can be anything that attacks your sense of safety, either physical or emotional. Getting fired is traumatic for a lot of people. Not performing in an important situation can be traumatic.
And
for
that
people.
changes the activity within your brain.
Well, it depends on how
if it's
strong
really,
it is.
If it was really strong.
If it's really strong.
Then the activity centers of your brain would
Well,
change.
and there's one thing we haven't talked about yet called brain reserve, which is how healthy was the brain that you brought into trauma. Because you can take two soldiers, put them in the same tank, and expose them to the same blast, the same angles, everything's the same. One walks away unharmed, the other one's permanently disabled. Why? It's the brain they brought into the trauma. And so if your mother used drugs while she was pregnant with you, she decreased your reserve. If your mom and dad fought a lot or they separated when she was pregnant with you, that decreased your reserve. If she gave you bad food, if she neglected you, if there was chronic stress, that's decreasing your reserve. So all of us have a certain level of reserve when we go into that trauma. And some people get post-traumatic growth that they're actually better after the trauma. They make the trauma and make something meaningful out of it. And other people have post-traumatic stress where it really causes them to suffer. So I love the idea of brain reserve because I'm like always thinking of boosting mine.
Yeah, because then also when something traumatic happens, I'm in a better place, right? So
Right. Like if you kill the ants, if your ant population is low.
My automatic negative thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're masterful, if you have an anteater running around in your head, cleaning up the negative thoughts that all of us have, when you go into that trauma, well, you're just better able to deal with it than if you have an undisciplined mind that's infested. And there's nowhere in school that people teach you to kill the ants. We have a foundation called the Change Your Brain Foundation. And I love it so much. We're dedicated to research, education, service. But last year, we produced this new course called Brain Thrive by 5. So it's for preschoolers, kindergarten, grade 1, where we teach kids to love and care for their brain. It's like 30 modules. They're 6 to 7 minutes long. And 6 of them are on learning to kill the ants. And little kids just love that. You don't have to believe every stupid thing you think. And I don't know if you know, but Jerry Seinfeld once said, the brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that nobody should ever hear. And just because you have a bad thought doesn't even mean you believe the thought, right? It's not the thoughts you have that make you suffer. It's the thoughts you attach to that make you suffer. I get all sorts of crazy thoughts, and I'm like, my brain is so creative. But I don't believe most of them.
Did you know that Amazon has a $50 million fund that they have to pay out every month? And here's how you...
Quick one. Just want to talk to you about our sponsor, super quick, called LinkedIn Jobs. Hiring is one of the most... Tell me about the most unhealthy brain you've ever seen.
For a 15-year-old, it was Kip Kinkle. He's a 15-year-old boy in Springfield, Oregon, who brought weapons to school, got arrested. His parents picked him up from jail. And sometime between 6 o'clock that night and 8 o'clock the next morning, he murdered his mom and dad. And then he went to Thurston High School in Springfield, Oregon, and shot 25 people. based on my work, they scanned him for his trial. His brain was so awful. Like, I'd never seen a 15-year-old that had a brain so damaged. And his life reflected it.
What did you see in his brain
It was shriveled
at 15?
at 15. And it's like, okay, why? Well, he murdered his mom and dad, so I couldn't get a good history. But he either had anoxia at birth, a lack of oxygen, a severe infection, or something was poisoning his brain. It could have been lead. It could have been an infection. I mean, we were talking about M. The I is immunity and infections. It's a major cause of psychiatric problems. Nobody knows about it.
Have you scanned the brains of lots of psychopaths?
I have.
And what do you see when you look at a psychopath?
So I published a study on murderers, and young murderers have really low frontal lobe function. Older murderers, it's global, low activity. Now, not all murderers are the same. I have one murderer's brain. Her brain actually looked pretty good, but she was in the middle of being abused by her husband, and she murdered him. And it wasn't that irrational, you know, when you really know her story. But most brains are troubled.
Do you think you could look at a brain and predict?
Now, you should ask me, should you scan presidential candidates?
Interesting.
Especially now.
What do you think Donald Trump's brain looks like?
Well, I think if we scanned President Biden or former President Trump, neither one of them would be healthy. I mean, one, we talked about the older you got, the less healthy they are. And if someone is going to have nuclear codes, shouldn't we know what their brain looks like? And
Love you.
And I wrote an op-ed piece in 2008 when Barack Obama was running against John McCain, arguing for, don't you think we should scan presidential candidates? And yeah, I don't think either one of their brains would be healthy. And that concerns me because, I mean, what do we need for our top politicians? Judgment, forethought, impulse control.
Okay, so playing devil's advocate to that, if we started to do that at the very highest office in the land, then that philosophy might creep down to lower offices in the land. And when you go and try and get a job at, I don't know, a restaurant or a marketing agency, it might become the norm that there's a almost brain discrimination or brain prejudice in play where someone like me, they have their brain scan, they go, listen, he's not going to be very good at, I don't know, focusing on things.
It's an interesting question. I have to tell you, if you date one of my children for more than 4 months, I'm going to get you scanned.
Really?
I'm going to figure out how to do that. It's the rule in my family. And if you have a bad brain, it doesn't mean you can't come back. But are you smart enough to fix it? That would be the question.
Have you done that?
Well, my son-in-law, Jesse, who I love, his mother has paranoid schizophrenia. And I'm like, I want to scan your brain. And I have. He actually wrote a book called Change Your Brain Before 25. And he opens the book with the story of his scan and him sitting with me. He's 6'4", I'm 5'6", and he said he'd never felt so small. And yeah, no, that's the rule in my family. Like I said, when I met my wife, I really liked her. And the first naked part of her I wanted to see was her brain. And so 3 weeks into our relationship, I'm like, hey, you haven't seen the clinic. Don't you want to see the clinic? She came, I scanned her, and it passed.
Do you use her brain against her? I bet you do. I bet you do.
No.
spoke to Tana, she said you do. You're telling me there's not been one time where you've brought up her brain in a moment of conflict or arguments? Not once, because I will call Tana.
I don't. Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
Because you know what I do? And this is on par with killing the ants. I do an exercise with my patients called the one-page miracle. On one piece of paper, write down what you want. Relate, and in a very specific way. What do you want in your relationships, your work, your money, your physical, emotional, and spiritual health? What do you want? And with her, because she's on the top of my list, I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship. I always want that. I don't always feel like that. Rude thoughts come into my head. And if I've slept and I've eaten, I never say them. Why? Because it doesn't get me what I want, right? And that's not selfish. People go, oh, but you know, what you want is, what I want is not selfish. It's good. Because hedonism is the enemy of happiness. But happiness is a moral obligation because of how you impact other people. Your brain's so smart, but you have to tell it what you want. And every major business, including mine, we have a one-page strategic plan. We know what we want and we know what we're going to do this quarter and this year. But people don't do that in their lives.
And you think they should have like a life plan?
Every person should. What do you want? Is your behavior getting you what you want?
Do you think the brain almost conspires to fit what you want? I.e. the brain, once you're clear on what you want, I guess your actions will change a little bit and then your brain will change shape to fit what you've said you wanted.
Yes. And the brain is lazy. The brain does what you allow it to do. And it's habitual. I was talking to one of my patients about this yesterday because we were working on his one-page miracle. And he's like, you know, I could be more positive. And I go, it's a habit to be negative or to be positive. Which highways are you building in your brain? Positive highways or negative highways? Accurate highways or distorted highways? You build them. And if you watch the news, they'll become more distorted. Because
Really?
it's, yeah. In my book, The End of Mental Illness, I did something. It was very fun for me to do. I imagined if I was an evil ruler and I wanted to create mental illness, what would I do? And watching the news, I think there's 62 evil ruler strategies, and I think that's like 12. Because the news is no longer the news. The news is about eyeballs and selling things, and negativity sells. If I can scare you, that will sell. And so you have to be very careful with what you allow in your brain. And yes, you should be informed, but not over and over and over and over again. People who start the day with the news are 27% less happy in the afternoon.
Well, I listen to lots of true crime and serial killer things, like every day. Are you telling me?
It's so funny. I have this show on Instagram called Scan My Brain. I take influential people and scan them. And I did Meghan Trainor, the musician. I love her music. And she goes, I can't sleep. And every night before bed, she's listening to true crime. And I'm like, stop that.
Do you think it matters? Because I listen to true crime before bed.
I have this exercise that I recommend to all my patients. I've done it for 10 years. What went well when I go to bed? I start at the beginning of the day and just go hour by hour looking for what went right about my day. I think that's sets your dreams up to be more positive. I think I do both, and then I just see which one works better for you. Every day, win or learn.
What is the I in Bright Minds?
Immunity and infections. So Do you know your vitamin D level?
No, but I do take the only supplement that take frequently. I'd say there's two: is vitamin D and omega-3. But because I'm black as well.
You need more vitamin D.
Yeah.
So people have darker skin and going from Africa where there's a lot of sun to the UK where there's no sun dramatically increase the risk of mental health problems.
Yeah.
Because of vitamin D deficiencies.
Do you know what? I think there's a certain member of my family who I won't name who went from Africa. They've got two Nigerian parents, went from Africa to the UK, and I saw their mental health deteriorate quite significantly to the point that we believe this person might have bipolar now. And I part of me suspects, once I learned about vitamin D deficiency in people that have darker skin, this person has very, 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 very black skin, that it might be associated with that change. Being in a new country that has no sunlight for 30 years when you're, black.
You bet.
Yeah.
And it's part of, so if you see mental health as brain health, then that becomes a critical intervention. If you're not paying attention to brain health, then you're like, well, what antipsychotic? Or what mood stabilizer can I give them. And I very well may use an antipsychotic or a mood stabilizer, but if I get your brain healthy, you might not need it, or you'll need half the dose. So, and then infections, I mean, we're just coming out of a pandemic, and COVID changes your brain in a bad way. It causes like a inflammatory bomb to go off in your brain. I was on the Kardashian show last year because I scanned Kendall. Kendall came to see me. And obviously I was on the show, so it was public knowledge. And it was post-COVID, and her emotional brain just was on fire. And that's what we saw with COVID. And long COVID, emotional brain is hot, but then the cortex begins to get low in activity. It's a bad combination.
Why? What does that mean?
It's like chronic damage.
And what does that mean in terms of behavior? What's the implications for behavior?
So the hot limbic brain, tense anxiety that you hadn't had. If you start damaging your cortex and all of a sudden you're sad, you're impulsive, you're irritable, you can get dark thoughts, sometimes even suicidal thoughts. And people who got COVID significantly increase in dementia.
Someone who's listening to this right now that is depressed, clinically depressed, or just feels, depressive symptoms, where do you start? Let's go to the extreme end. Someone that can't get themselves out of bed. I sat here with Jada Pinkett, and she told me that she was clinically depressed, and if she just got to 4 p.m. every day, to her that was a victory. There are lots of people out there that are in that situation right now. Where do you start with those people? What advice do you give them? Because I'm sure you see a lot of them in your practice.
It starts with awareness.
Yeah.
That maybe this is not me, maybe it's my brain. Mm-hmm. And then it starts with loving your brain and then investigating your brain. Because depression is like chest pain. So if somebody like had chest pain, you're like, well, where would you start? Well, you start with an evaluation. You wouldn't start with drugs. I mean, that would be like ludicrous. You would like go, well, why do you have chest pain? Why are you depressed? You know, how's your thyroid, right? The person that can't get off the couch, they could be hypothyroid. Or one of my friends got depressed. She had anemia. She had pernicious anemia because it was a B12 deficiency. I wouldn't assume, oh, you're depressed, take this medicine. Depression is what it is. It's not why it is. And if you don't know why it is, how do you effectively treat something? Like so many people come to me and they go, I have an autoimmune disorder. It's like, well, why do you have an autoimmune disorder? Why is your body so mad at you? It's attacking itself. And so...
Because my body's broken.
But why is your body broken? Right? And I hate the term broken, right? There's series like The Broken Brain. And it's like, no, it's not optimized. Let's optimize it. Right? I never want my patients to think of them as mental, and I never want them to think of themselves as broken. You are awesome. So how can I help you be maybe 10% more awesome?
People feel like their brain is against them, is working against them when they're feeling depression or those chronic cycles of negative thinking. Why is my brain attacking me? Why is it against me?
So part of it is it's not healthy, and part of it's undisciplined. And I got to do a lecture last year for the coaching staff of the Miami Heat. It was so much fun for me. And I'm really thinking a lot about elite performance. And I think it's just such a better model. It's like, let me help you be your best rather than let me fix you. And I think someone like you, I mean, it's like, you're already awesome. How can I make you more awesome? How can I give you more access to your own brain? And it's easier to sell that than, you know, let me give you a diagnosis of a mental illness and then let me give you a medicine you have to take for the rest of your life. This is the wrong model. The psychiatry bad thing. And then the S is sleep.
I've got obsessed with my sleep recently. I have my Whoop on pretty much all the time, and they're a sponsor of this podcast, I probably should say, but I'm also like an equity shareholder in the company. But it's become one of my biggest obsessions in my life is waking up in the morning and looking at how I slept, how much deep sleep, restorative sleep I've had, my heart rate variability, all that stuff. I'm obsessed with it. What does sleep do to my brain? I guess you said earlier that it kind of cleans it and refreshes it.
Well, we didn't even know that until, I guess it was 10 or 12 years ago, where researchers saw that the fluid system in your brain, it's called the glymphatic system, doesn't open up when you're awake. But when you're asleep, it opens up and then sort of cleans things, washes things. And so for those people like me, who I thought I was special because I could get by on 4 hours of sleep at night, I'm sort of running around with a toxic brain or a dirty brain. And so...
What are those toxins? So what is it cleaning?
Have you heard of beta amyloid, which is a cluster of proteins that increases your risk of Alzheimer's disease? So they build up during the day, the system cleans it. But if you're not getting good sleep, you have more of a toxic buildup of those kinds of clumping proteins that are problematic for you.
Interesting. Interesting. Is there anything else people need to know about sleep in the brain? Because I think everybody knows sleep is important. A lot of people struggle with sleep.
Sleep apnea triples the risk of Alzheimer's disease. One of the big lessons imaging has taught me that I can actually see the pattern for sleep apnea on a scan, and it looks like early Alzheimer's disease. Bilateral, parietal, top back part of your brain decreases.
What is Sleep apnea.
Snore loudly, stop breathing at night, chronically tired the next day. So when you sleep, you're breathing. You have many apneic episodes where you stop breathing. And so, and if you're sleeping alone, you actually might not know it because no one's being woken up by your snoring. And even people who've been diagnosed with it don't treat it because they don't want to wear the mask at night. And I'm like, no, you have to treat it. Otherwise, the worst thing you can do for your brain is starve it of oxygen. That's the worst thing you can do for your brain.
So breath work then must be quite good for the brain.
Breath work is good for the brain. One of my tiny habits, I have many of them for brain health, is the 15-second breath. 8 seconds in, hold it for a second and a half, 4 seconds out, hold it for a second and a half. Do that 4 times, 8 times, it'll break a panic attack. Do it on a routine basis, it'll increase your heart rate variability.
Breath work will.
Breath work.
Heart rate variability is this metric that I think much of society have suddenly become quite obsessed with, including me. Me and my friends literally have a heart rate variability contest every morning where we like screenshot our heart rate variability and drop it into the chat. And some of my friends are trying to increase theirs. One of my friends called Ash, I mentioned him earlier on. His has been quite low, so he's kind of been trying to get it up. I guess we're going to have to ask 2 questions here, which is, what is heart rate variability? And the second question is, how do I improve it, in your view?
So again, you You can't change what you don't measure. And now people who wear Apple Watches or Oura Rings or devices that measure it, heart rate variability is the beat to beat variability of your heart rate. And people go, oh, well, my heart rate should beat the same. Well, no, actually, the more variable it is, bum, 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 rather than bum, 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 bum. First heard about heart rate variability with babies. That when a baby is being born, they actually put a scalp monitor on it and they look at the heart rate variability of the baby. And if it's very variable, it's bouncing all over the place, well, it's a sign of heart health. When it flattens and becomes even, like it's just 70, they go get the baby because that means the baby is in trouble.
Doesn't make any sense, does it? It's like counterintuitive.
It's a little bit counterintuitive, but if your heart rate variability is low, you have a higher risk of anxiety, depression, and heart disease, dying early. I mean, there's this huge connection between your brain health and your heart health. And so meditation increases heart rate variability, breath work increases heart rate variability, exercise can increase heart rate variability, good sleep and good sleep hygiene can increase it, ants decrease heart rate variability.
I stopped drinking alcohol for this very reason. People don't know this, but I mean, I've probably mentioned it twice now on air, but I quit drinking alcohol about a month and a half ago, I think. And part of the reason is when I wore my Whoop and then I had, I don't know, 1 glass of wine or 2 glasses or 3 glasses of wine the day before. When I woke up the next day, my heart rate variability was like flashing red. It was 30, 40. Typically, on a great day, my heart rate variability is 150, 140, which is strong.
Really strong.
I know this because I compete with my friends. But on a day where I had a glass of alcohol, it'd be flashing red and it would be 40. Also, if I was sick, it would be 40. Also, if I had a really stressful, unslept day the day before, it would also be 40. And the fact that alcohol was causing my heart to respond the same as a awfully stressful, unslept day or COVID, I thought, fuck that. And so that's part of the reason I quit drinking alcohol.
And now that you have brain envy,
Yeah.
you're going to have a healthier brain if you keep it away. Because alcohol lies to us.
Alcohol lies to us.
Alcohol causes damage in the brain.
Really?
Even a little bit of alcohol causes damage in the brain. It disrupts something called white matter. So gray matter, nerve cell bodies, white matter, nerve cell tracts. So white matter is the highways in your brain that transmit information and impulses. And even a little bit of alcohol has been shown to disrupt the white matter in your brain. I don't want anything messing with the highways in my brain. But I love that you measured it, you made the connection, and then you stopped it. It's a sign of intelligent life because you love yourself.
Mm-hmm. Alcohol. Because there's a lot of people that are sat on the fence right now with alcohol. They probably don't have a really bad relationship with it. They're probably not alcoholics, but they kind of they have it because society is constructed in such a way that on a Friday evening when the waiter comes over and puts down the wine list, you just go, oh, okay, whatever. That's who I was. I was just on the fence. My friend, one of my best friends, was an alcoholic. So I understand why he quit, because he had this really dysfunctional relationship with it that would ruin his life. I'm the type of person that would have 1 drink, 2 drinks, and then I'd maybe stop. I didn't feel the need to have 3, 4, 7, 19. He was different. And also because of that, there was no adverse consequences in my life. So when I went away with him recently, he's writing a book on alcohol and alcoholism. He was telling me about the book and I was going, I personally wouldn't read that book because I don't feel like I have a problem with alcohol. This was before I quit. So I was like, what I would love from a book, this is just me personally, is a book that made the case to people who are kind of sat on the fence that a drink or a beer or a glass of wine, just because, I don't know, society is constructed in such a way where it's hard to avoid. But they could go for a mocktail if someone gave them some performance-based evidence that alcohol, just even a little bit, the casual drinking, actually matters. So this is where you come in, doctor.
One of my biggest Instagram posts was "I told you so." The American Cancer Society came out and said any alcohol increases your risk of 7 different types of cancer. And I've been talking about this for 30 years because I have scans. And people who drink any alcohol have lower activity than people who don't drink at all. And obviously, alcoholics, they have terrible looking brains. Don't do that. But you got to ask yourself why. And remember, we talked about the one-page miracle. What do you want? Relationships, work, money, physical, emotional, spiritual health. So where does alcohol come in to that? Oh, well, it helps me relaxed. Well, the 15-second breath will help you relax, but there are no side effects to it. That will increase your heart rate variability. Alcohol will decrease heart rate variability and brain function. And if it decreases brain function, it decreases decision making. As a psychiatrist, 30%, 40% of the people I see, they initially come to my office because it's somehow alcohol related. Fight with their spouse, problems with their kids, whatever. I'm so impressed. You noticed the difference with heart rate variability and then you stopped.
Yeah, because I was offensive with alcohol. And it's crazy. And I now understand how difficult it is to stop in our society. I was telling my team, I quit and I went for dinner with a guy called Skrillex. Everyone knows Skrillex. He's a DJ, Sonny. And this was a week after I'd quit. Sat in the restaurant. The waiter comes over, bless him, and he goes, "Here's the wine list." I go, I don't drink alcohol. He goes and gets a bottle of wine and he puts it next to me and goes, "This is not alcohol. This is art. I'm going to leave it next to you just in case you get tempted." And Sonny, to his credit, is telling this waiter, no, he doesn't drink. This waiter's having none of it. And in that moment, I understood how difficult it is to quit in the society that we've built, where every social interaction apparently needs to be fueled by alcohol. And if you say no, you're either weird or someone will try and change your mind or persuade you otherwise. It's just this culture we have.
The evil ruler society. That's an evil ruler strategy. The food pushers, the drug pushers, the alcohol pushers. For me, worst decision.
Sex and libido. A lot of people are struggling with their sex lives, getting an erection, getting aroused, men and women. The brain and sex. I imagine you have people come to you and go, "Listen, me and my wife, me and my partner, me and my husband, we've stopped having sex. I've lost my libido." When you hear that and you offer people advice on libido and sex, what do they
get your
need
brain
to know?
right, your sex life gets better. In large part, it's about blood flow. And if you're having erectile dysfunction or low libido, you got to go, well, why? What are the risk factors with that? And many of them relate to what's going on in your brain. And I so often people go, "I did everything you said, and my wife's so much happier with our sex life." You have to check your hormones. I think that's very important. You have to deal with whatever sexual trauma might be there. The biggest sex organ in the body is your brain. If there's no forethought, there's no foreplay. And so it's about the decisions that you make.
What else do I need to know about sex? If I'm trying to get my partner in the mood and I'm trying to make them aroused,
It depends on their brain.
Okay, right.
So if your partner has a very busy frontal lobe, that part called the anterior cingulate gyrus, you can't go, "Come on, let's have sex." Because you've met people with the automatic no, that no matter what you say, they're going to say the opposite of it, or they're going to fuss with it. I mean, it's like, "It's a nice day today." "Oh, no, it was nicer yesterday." I mean, even simple things. So you're going to want to have sex? No. I was at this lecture once, and somebody came up to me at a break and said, "You've helped me so much. I thought my wife just didn't love me." And what I realized is that part of her brain was just working too hard. So now I ask everything in the opposite. It's like, oh, like if I wanted to go to the store, she'd never want to go with me. And I'd go, so now what I do is I go, I'm going to go to the store. You probably don't want to come. What do you mean I don't want to come? Of course I want to come. He said, but it doesn't sound right to say, well, you probably don't want to have sex. Oh, I go, okay, I know her brain, do this. And I gave him natural things to boost serotonin. So I said, take her out for a pasta dinner. So I'm not a fan of pasta generally, except for these people. Take her out for a pasta dinner because pasta increases serotonin. Then take her for a walk around the lake because exercise increases serotonin. Then give her a piece of dark chocolate. Not too many, because if you get her too many, she'll have no need for you. But dark chocolate has PEA in it, phenylethylamines, that alerts your brain that something fun is about to happen. And then put on a little baby powder, because baby powder, it's been shown scientifically, is a natural aphrodisiac for women. Because what do women unconsciously associate to baby powder? Babies. And unconsciously they want one. And then rubber back and don't ask for anything directly. And from about day 4 to about day 18 of her menstrual cycle, you're likely to get lucky.
Why from day 4 to day 18?
Because she's the last week of a woman's menstrual cycle, especially people who have this brain type, tend to be more irritable.
Is that before their period?
So it's before the period.
Okay, so the week before their period is when she's going to be
2 weeks before their period is generally the best time.
Do men and women have different brains? Significantly?
Wildly so.
Wildly
So
different.
this whole thing about you can't put your gender on your medical forms is just insanely stupid, because gender matters. Like estrogen and testosterone, they matter when it comes to brain function. I published a study on 46,000 scans looking at the differences between male and female brains, and they're wild. Women have much better frontal lobes function, but much better blood flow to the front part of their brain,
Which makes them
good leaders. If you think of impulse control and collaboration and communication. And the one statistic that just hammers this home is who goes to jail? Men. 14 times more than women. But women get depressed twice as much as men because their limbic or emotional brain is much busier than the male brain. And that's why in every human society, women are primary caretakers for children. Women have a bigger nesting instinct. So I told you we moved recently, and moving is much harder on women in general than it is in men because they feel like they lose their nest and they have to redo their nest. And I was an Army psychiatrist for 7 years, and I used to always tell the guys, I'm like, when you move, you stay home and help her put the house together because she's going to be way happier for you.
on that impulse control bit. I remember reading the statistics that men suffer with gambling addictions and betting addictions significantly more than women.
Drug addictions, alcohol, ADD, 5 times more than women. But women get help because they're not afraid to ask for help. Where for men, it's often a macho thing. It's like, there's nothing the matter with me, which is why women attempt suicide 3 to 4 times more than males, but males kill themselves 3 to 4 times more than women do because men use more violent means, and men aren't communicating, I'm in trouble.
Saunas and exercise on the brain. Good for the brain?
So I'm a huge fan of saunas because the studies, mostly from Northern Europe, people who take the most saunas have the lowest incidence of Alzheimer's disease. And I told you about my mercury. Detoxing is really important. And you can detox in a lot of different ways, but sauna is one of the most effective ways. Exercise is, you want to stay young, walk like you're late. If you're 80 and you can walk 3 miles an hour, you have a 90% chance of living till you're 90. If you can only walk a mile an hour, you have a 90% chance you're not going to live until you're 90. So exercise boosts blood flow. It increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It increases serotonin, increases dopamine. Another interesting thing is, should you do cold plunges? Because cold plunges have been found to fairly dramatically increase dopamine.
So you should do cold plunges.
Not if you have heart problems. So if you have heart problems, I wouldn't do that. But if you have inflammation, if you have pain.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about is, well, there's really two outstanding questions that I have for you, Doctor. The first one is about screen time. People want to know, does screen time, this generation that have grown up 11 hours a day on a screen or social media, up to 11 hours a day, according to some studies, does that have an impact on our brain?
It does. It shrinks it. It's sad. I mean, what it does is it wears out your pleasure centers. So you have these two areas in your brain called the nucleus accumbens, and they respond to dopamine. And they bring you happiness, and they bring you pleasure, and they bring you motivation, and they bring you drive. And when you're hitting them, like every buzz on your phone,
Hey Leute, heute zeige ich euch den neuen Exit Smuggler's Basement. Im Deutschen, glaube ich, heißt es Schmugglerkeller. Und los geht's.
baby. What? No, baby. Thank you for the offer, though. I'm playing my game. I love you. Zach, I'm sorry, bro. I haven't been chatting much. Got 2 stars. Junk box is completely full. Nice, dude. Can finish some hideout upgrades. Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, I've been having troubles. I have too many full boxes. Just finished Shooterborn.
Hey guys, before
Blah, 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 blah. Wow, it's taking forever to load me out.